Ever been raped by a fridge?
Oh, what a stud! I can't get enough. Jocks, let me tie you to the bed, baby.
Or maybe killed by thick robo-twins like that? Boys, be patient. Rule 34 is already in the works for this game. Atomic Heart, also referred to as Atomic Fallout Wolfenschlag Portal, is quite an interesting game. And although we already have boycotting going on in the background like we had with Hogwarts Legacy, but this time because it's a Russian developer, I think this game is absolutely worth picking up. Listen carefully, I don't even know how to say it, but we have an optimized game at launch in 2023.
Wow, how's that even possible?
I want babies with these guys.
Oh my god. What?
Yeah, these days this is a novelty. But let's be honest, Atomic Heart is extremely weird, but in a good way. It takes place in an alternate 1955 where the Soviet Union is the world-leading force due to a technological breakthrough by scientist Dmitry Sechenov. Unfortunately though, some of his robots turned hostile and you, Major Sergei Nechayev, codenamed Agent P3 as his personal agent, have to find out why that is. I gotta say, I would have appreciated a silent protagonist a lot more because as it stands right now, P3 got more cheese going on than Eric's new world record pizza. I don't know if the jokes got lost in translation, but the English version is nothing to write home about. He's like a child that just learned a new swear word from his uncle and is now using it in every other sentence. It's almost so bad that it's laughable, but it's not quite there. It's still borderline cringe. The combat is basically like every other shooter, but with a little twist. Early on in the game, you acquire a glove called Charles, that gives you a few abilities to spice up the action. From Confringo to Levioso to Protego. Oh, wrong game? Alright, never mind. But anyways, you should stick to ranged combat because melee combat in this game is very odd and clunky. You'll have to mix both though, since some enemy types are weaker to melee than ranged and the other way around, but melee just doesn't feel as satisfying as ranged combat. In the beginning, the fighting can get really overwhelming as you're swarmed by a billion enemies at once, but as the game goes on and P3 gets stronger, you'll find yourself handling it like the true Russian gigachat you are. Upgrades and crafting in this game are pretty simple and straightforward, but it's actually quite satisfying and you're really able to feel the progression. Although I have to say the game is quite challenging and even on easy difficulty, you may have some tough encounters. Atomic Heart's biggest problem gameplay-wise is the lack of enemy variety. Normal enemies can get boringly repetitive after you fought your 69,420th android or a humanoid mannequin, especially since the game throws a lot of them at you in little to no time. But the bosses? Oh man. The bosses are outstanding. I won't spoiler anything, but please play the game if you like good boss fights. If we take a look at the graphics, then you probably won't believe me that this game is not made by a AAA studio. Mundfish is a AA studio, funded by rather questionable sources, but that's due to them being Russian studio and it's really hard for them to find financial sources because of, well, known circumstances. Atomic Heart looks gorgeous with so much attention to detail, like different reload animations depending on the amount of ammo left in the magazine and much more. As I said, finding an optimized game at launch in 2023 is like seeing a Twitter user saying, "I'm sorry, you're right." Basically non-existent. On max settings, I've never had my FPS drop below 60 and this game looks anything but bad. Stunning environments, huge buildings, quirky and scary abandoned labs, and everything else any utopia turned dystopian robot game needs. The setting and art style are top notch and for a first release, almost unthinkable. The biggest downside is that while the open world looks good and full, I found myself rather driving through and skipping many smaller villages than actually visiting them due to the annoying alarm system in the game. There is security cameras everywhere that alert nearby enemies, which robs you of moments to just take a breath and enjoy the view. If you want to get the best upgrades for your weapons though, you'll have to go out and explore a little bit since the best things are out there to find. As a Souls fan, I also don't appreciate the indestructible environment. Like, come on, these balloons are more stable than my mental health. The story in the game is decent. It's nothing super compelling, but it's intriguing enough to have kept me going, mostly out of curiosity on what happens next. You can get two different endings, which both are, well, okay-ish, but it's definitely not as bad as other recent titles we've received. The structure of the game reminded me a little bit of Half-Life as well. Of course, nowhere near as good as Half-Life, but that's a really high bar to reach. The Portal-like puzzles are a creative idea, but doing the same three things all the time at almost every door you encounter is nothing mind-boggling and feels like an artificial way to lengthen the duration of the game. The around 20 hours of gameplay you get from the main story and a few single-digit hours more from side missions are well worth the buck and evenly paced. The only thing that can throw a few people off is the linearity in the beginning of the game, where you're constantly tasked with tedious things. So much that even the protagonist acknowledges his boredom.
So every other day you gotta run around collecting 4 different canisters? What a pain in the ass.
But that's a lazy way to have an excuse for a lame task like this. Acknowledging boring gameplay is good, but keeping it in the game and having the main character point it out and thinking that's enough to fix the issue is, yeah, lazy approach. Or as P3 would say, there are also quite a few bugs, like music randomly starting to play or cutting off even though nothing changed, or UI glitches like loot pop-ups staying there during cutscenes, but it's nothing game breaking. Speaking of loot pop-ups, the looting in this game is really well implemented. Your glove gives you the ability to just hold down a single button, and by telekinesis powers you just open drawers and loot stuff inside them automatically. It's really satisfying. I also have to mention the music. Mick Gordon just doing Mick Gordon things, weird synthesizers accompanying the obscurity of this game, Russian covers of popular songs, classical music, and much more. The music in this game is really, really good. It makes the best moments of the game even better and lightens up the slightly worse moments too. Like I said, for a first release and for a AA company, Mundfish did a phenomenal job here, and I think the studio has a really bright future. Awesome music, stunning set, art style and graphics, and really solid gameplay just outshine the negative aspects of the game by a margin. And although the $70 price point is really high, but unfortunately the new standard of the gaming industry, I think it's well worth the buck. I certainly recommend the game, and I think that you should give it a try. Please don't forget to check out my other content as well. I've uploaded a video on the current state of AAA games and how indie games are beating them, for example. I'd certainly appreciate it if you check that one out as well. Alright, see ya.